April 20th EDA meeting to order at 8:31. We'll review the agenda if there's any additions or modifications.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Carried. We'll review the minutes from March 16th meeting. Anyone have modifications or changes?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from March 16th.
I'll second.
Motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Dan, you want to take on?
Sure.
Number four?
We haven't had an abatement application in about a year and a half, and all of a sudden we had two within a couple weeks. So I'm gonna go through each one, and we will need action to recommend to the county board at the end of each one. So I'll start with the Boundary Oil in Elk River. This is a lubricant company. They serve the automotive trucking and excavating company. They've been in Elk River since 1981. Their home offices are there, but they do have locations throughout Minnesota and Wisconsin. And this is the aerial of the property. The southern property on there is the one we'll actually be talking about today. That's where the building's gonna be built. And if you can see, there's a lot of wetland, which is causing some of the additional costs on this project. And they also have to put a water line in there from city services. So there's about $800,000 in extra costs that a typical project would not have. If you're trying to visualize where this is, that's Vision Transportation to the northwest. And then the school ball yards are right to the east there. And that's the road that would go to the golf course if you stayed on it. So the project is a 25,000 square foot shop. They would have room for an additional expansion that is on their agenda for the next several years as well. So this will lead to other projects, we believe. The total site on both parcels is 12.84 acres, and then you can see some of those extra costs that I mentioned in the previous slide. And it is a 4.3 million project, so it is a sizable project. Upon completion, it'll have about a $1.5 million value. Of that, 1.4 is new value. Now it has been replatted and the land value has gone up about 50,000, so that just happened in the last couple weeks. So these numbers are best estimates. I still think the property taxes will be very, very close to that 43,500. That's for all entities. And then it's broken down school, city, and county. So our county portion there is $11,000 per year is what we feel this project will add. So the request was for 10 years. Total abatement would be $110,500. It would create 14 jobs, and you can see it's a decent wage, and they do have overtime. They average 10 hours a week in overtime, so that would bring it up a little bit. We put our jobs that are added into an economic impact software service. You can see every project has ripple effects. So these 14 jobs, they feel would add an additional 3.5 jobs, and you can see the economic impact. The value added is the supply chain. And the output is everything they manufacture. That's the total value that's brought into the community. So we use those last two numbers and divide the total abatement request into those two numbers, and it scored a 15 out of 25. I'll show you what these mean on the next slide, but it did score a 27. So remember that number. And if we look at our tax abatement policy, a 27 would be in that moderate range. So they'd be eligible for 50% of the request. That equals 5525. They would be eligible over the next 10 years, $55,250. The city of Elk River is also reviewing an 11-year application, and they'd be eligible for $138,000, 11-year abatement at 100%. I know that just went to the EDA, Josh, and it'll go to the council here in a couple weeks. So that's the Boundary Oil project. Does anyone have any questions?
Is the school coming in on it, or
They are not. No, they are not. So they would pay full school taxes.
One question I have, is there any, like, if they don't do the jobs, I know some of the federal things, if they don't do the jobs, is there anything we can do to like reduce at some point? Or?
Typically, they have 2 years to meet the job requirements. So if they don't, it's a pay-as-you-go. So if they don't meet the requirements, they don't get the abatement. And we do send reports to them the first 2 years. They have to fill us in on what they've done. And once again, if they don't have the jobs after 2 years, they will not get the abatement, and they'll have to pay back any that they've received. So we do track it.
Do we, like, if they do get the jobs? Is there any tracking to make sure the jobs stay maintained through that?
We haven't done that, but that's something we certainly could do.
Yeah.
But typically, they meet that job requirement, and then they're eligible for the abatement. Now, if they were to sell the property, or it goes out of business, obviously, they lose the abatement going forward. Pico would be an example of that. They had it for 4 years, they sold the property, they didn't get the rest of their abatement.
Without the abatement, what was the new property tax that they would pay?
43,000. Oh, just for the county?
Yeah.
$11,050.
11,050, and so with this, they would get,
Half of that would be paid, and
yeah,
half
so,
would be.
and what was they'd be paying roughly $5,000 a year, correct?
Correct.
And what is that property generating in property tax now, prior to the last increase?
It's bare land. I didn't print that out, but it would probably be around $1,000.
$3,500.
3,500?
So it's still an incremental $2,500, even with the abatement, until,
Well, this is just the new property, so they'd actually be paying over 14,000. This is the only amount eligible for the abatement.
oh, got it, okay.
Good question.
But they're still paying incremental taxes.
Correct. Even to the city, who's having a $100,000 tax abatement, they'd still pay on that existing value. But I think the county portion of that would be $1,000.
But we could put in some of those conditions that, and is there any way that, like, say, and I'm not saying it specifically for this property, but a property that if the business took off and they were really booming, is there any way to shorten the timeline of that then? Or are you still committed to that?
We're committed. So once you agree to the parameters, as long as the business stays in place and they meet their goals, they would get that amount. Now, if values ever decline in a recession, it can only be refunded what they're actually paying in taxes, so it would be lower than that. They can't go above this amount, but it could go lower.
And what would kick in a potential early payoff?
There would be no early payoff. Typically, building values increase in value, but they'd still only be eligible. So if we're collecting more tax because of the increase in value,
But they're just getting.
they'd be locked in at this amount, yes.
Thank you.
So this group is a recommending body to the county board. I guess today I'm looking for a recommendation. There'd be a public hearing at the May 2nd county board meeting. And typically we report on what the EDA has recommended.
One point, could you, when you present to the board, could you call out what the incremental taxes, that the total incremental taxes that they would pay without the abatement, and then the increment, then the difference to show that how much more taxes are gonna be paid even with the abatement, I guess?
Absolutely.
That'd be a good number to show, I think.
Absolutely.
Then I guess I'd like to see something that commits them to that employee.
It's in the agreement, so when we have a public hearing, you'll see the actual agreement that'll be presented. They sign off on that, and like I said, we do track it to make sure they reach those goals. But the resolution and the agreement.
You said.
What's that?
If they meet it by 2 years, we have never tracked after that to make sure they maintain that level.
Okay. We'll add that.
When that 10 years goes, when's the start date of the 10 years?
If it was built this year, it'd be in 2 years, so pay 25.
So it'd be 2 years. So.
Yeah, because the structure won't be valued until the 25.
So it's
taxes.
upon full value of the structure?
Yes.
Okay.
Certificate of occupancy, once that's in place, it kicks in.
Okay.
Then you said nothing kicks in until after 2 years they meet that threshold of employee commitment.
Well, they get it the first 2 years, and if they don't meet the goals, then we claw it back and they have to pay us back.
Okay, thank you.
It's a refund, so they do pay their taxes. If the goals are met, they get it refunded back to them.
I'm sorry, Dan, you said what year were they established here?
1981.
80. Okay, that's what they said. 2 years.
And like I said, they've expanded in Minnesota and Wisconsin, so it is a very regional company.
And they live in the area?
I live in the area.
The Boderies are involved in a lot of things in Elk River.
Any further discussion?
I'll make a motion to approve the tax abatement request. That's what you're looking for.
Second?
Can we add that there's the 10-year commitment of job retention.
Mhm.
Is that okay? You want to-
Yes.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next one.
Move on to the CMP attachments. Chrissy, can you bring that one up? This one I do have the existing property tax. So CMP attachments, this is one of the companies I always point to as a great example. Just several years ago, back in 2014, he was working out of his home, Gary Kent. We helped him find a location and work on some zoning issues. He moved to Clear Lake in 2014. They already expanded in 2019, and you can see what their business includes: manufacturing skid steers, excavators, tractors, and plows, so a lot of the attachments, thus the name. They currently pay about $34,000 in property taxes on their existing facility. And it is 2 properties, so that property tax includes both properties. So this expansion project would actually be on the parcel to the east. So they do have an existing building that was part of their expansion in 19. They'd expand onto that building.
On what, 1200 or 1206?
On 1200 is where their expansion would be. The 1201 was their existing facility that they purchased.
Where's this at?
This is in Clear Lake, right off Highway 10, right across the street there, that little corner, that's the Brickyard restaurant. So the expansion would be 10,000 square feet. As you can see, the existing is 21,000. It does include a lot of automation, so what they want to do is free up capital because these automation costs are very expensive, but it will make them a lot more efficient. And it's approximately a $2.6 million project cost. They currently employ 29 employees and would look to add 10 jobs. The average wages are a little less than Beaudry, but still above the average in Sherburne County. And they also work about 5 hours overtime, which would bump up that wage. Taxable value for this project, it's a little smaller project, so a little smaller taxable value, about $380,000. And you can see their total annual property taxes from this project would be $10,900, and the county portion of that is about $3,000. They've requested a 12-year abatement for that $35,200. This one also has the economic impact with those ripple effects, and based on the scoring, this one actually got 35 points for the economic impact because it has such a small request at the $33,000 that it did score higher on that project, so it does have a 44-point score, which on our policy is 100% a high category. So their 2935 would equal 35,220 over the 12 years. There is an update to that bottom line. The city of Clear Lake just did implement a tax abatement policy, so they may be going to the city as well, but they haven't submitted that. That's very recent. So any questions on that project? Okay, dude. I thought I had on here current taxes.
It was on one of the first slides.
There you go. So they do pay $34,000 in current taxes. That would not be impacted at all.
And then what did you say the increase would be when all is said and done?
Total taxes would be about $11,000, and the county portion of that is $2,900.
I'd make a motion to approve the CMP attachment LLC abatement request. Rand, do you want to attach all those things that you did on the last one? I'll just make it part of the motion. With all the Rand attachments from the first one.
Is that where we're gonna go?
Come on, I just shaved 15 minutes off the meeting. Don't need to thank me.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right, Jessica, strategic plan?
Okay. So I actually, if I may, just have a couple little announcements before we start the strategic plan. After the last meeting, and we were going through the strategic plan, Andrew had emailed us, or maybe it was in conversation after, I'm not quite sure, but, and was inquiring about partnership with our Veterans Office and local manufacturers. And so myself and Bruce Price did go over and meet with Metalcraft. to see if some form of partnership could be had. And we're starting with Metalcraft. We'd like to look at Premier also, and then grow this program. But what this would look like and what Bruce is going to do is on May 16th, he will be going over there and having a table in their lunch room or break room for, I think it's like 2 hours, 11 to 1, and be available to talk about the veterans benefits that Sherburne County offers and be a direct point of contact. And then also, and for not only for the veterans that work there, but then also their family members, because it's not just the veteran themselves. If you have a family member that is a veteran, you could be eligible for benefits. And then also with that, what Metalcraft is going to do is when they have new employees that come in and they have the applications where you check if you're a veteran, then they will refer them directly to our veterans office for an appointment to make sure that they are receiving all the benefits that they would be eligible for. So Bruce will be doing that on the 16th, and then also at their all-staff meeting in June, he will be doing a presentation to the whole company, because a lot of the veterans programs are federal. They're not, because they have an office over in Wisconsin as well. And so a lot of the veterans benefits are federal. Some are specific to state and county, or I don't know about county, I can't speak to that, but for sure federal. And so that would touch more on the federal level and would also benefit their Wisconsin employees that they have as well. So we're pretty excited about that. The second thing is I volunteered to help Debbie, who's the Elk River Area Chamber of Commerce Executive Director. She said that she was going to be doing a regional economic development update. And so I said, well, let me know if you want me to volunteer that day and I can help you out. And I'm thinking like front table check-in. And then she sent me a thing saying that she would like me to present that day. So that's next Tuesday. I'll be presenting with Luke Greiner, the economic development update for the region. It'll be specifically focused on Sherburne County. And the presentation will be about how we have grown historically and we're projected to continue to grow, touch on broadband, SureCo, the impact of solar, our partnerships that we have with CMRP, the strategic planning that we're doing, and then some projects of the EDA. So that will be what I'm covering. Luke is covering demographics and all that fun stuff. What else do I have? Welcoming Wednesdays. So I can't remember if I talked about this at the last strategic meeting, but I will be sending you all an email after this with some marketing material if you would share within your network or as you see relevant or with people that you think would benefit from this event. Launch Minnesota has a program that initiative that they've started called Welcoming Wednesdays, which is a startup and small business resource that they were looking for hosts, for local hosts to highlight their own local startup and small business resources. And so the email came through and there was all these different, places that this was happening all around us. And Dan said, well, how come Sherburne County or even this whole region isn't represented in this? And I thought, I don't know what that is. So I figured it out. And we are now going to be hosting a Welcoming Wednesday event at the Government Center on May 10th. And so we will have 4 experts. We're going to have David Monroy, who is a local area small business attorney. And then we'll have David Heyer, who's from Deed. And so David will have information about like the state level funding programs or grant programs and that type of thing. And then Dan Bullard from the Initiative Foundation will be able to talk about the resources available at their development center. And then Andy Voller will be there as a commercial broker to talk to small businesses about that. So that will be on May 10th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. here in the Government Center.
And Benton County and Wright County will also have an event.
Yes, I did reach out to Amanda and Jolene from Benton and Wright counties, and so I can't remember who goes first. One's in June. Actually, I have it right in front of me. So Jolene's is in June, on June 14th, and then Amanda's will be in July. So we're just kind of piggybacking off of each other for the local area resources.
So I gotta compliment Jessica. I just asked, like you said, why don't we have one? And now all of a sudden we have three. So I'm very thankful. I give you an idea and you implement it. So great job on that.
Yeah, thank you.
And one thing on the idea on the veterans thing is that everybody's having trouble recruiting. Veterans are a good source of, to recruit from, especially folks just coming off active duty. So from the company's perspective, if they can, you know, if you've got a veteran that's looking at a couple of different companies and one is providing access to veterans benefits and another's not, it just may help sway that individual, you know, toward that company. From our perspective, from the county, if we can provide help to the companies to navigate that, because most companies don't have any experience recruiting veterans. If we can help with that, then that's an economic benefit to companies in the county and those coming into the county as well.
And Malachi was super excited about the idea, so I would imagine that I don't think we'll have any problem expanding this to other different manufacturers. Okay, so the next thing is the strategic plan, which I know you're all super excited about. But we do gotta get it done. So Chrissy, we left off on the bottom of page 3 and the area of focus there was housing. So for housing, we have goals of updating our housing study. Just to kind of preface the housing discussion, the county board has requested a workshop in regard to housing and how the county is participating in housing just across economic development, health and human services, planning and zoning. And so our 3 departments are in the process of building a workshop on that. So I would envision some of the work that we would do here would kind of transcend into that workshop also. But as far as the housing study goes, Dan did reach out to Maxfield to see what it would cost to update the housing study, to do a full, essentially a start from scratch, brand new comprehensive study. We're looking at $38,000 to do that. And then to just update the study, so it says scope of work for a housing demand update, that's $20,000. So we can add under the investment category there, that there is a price in there, so that's something that you guys would have to decide if that's what you would like to spend some of your EDA dollars on updating. The second goal there, it says to attract affordable housing developers, to increase affordable housing options in the county. I know one thing that the county board was interested in learning about. Currently, we do not incentivize any housing projects, and possibly that could be an area to explore and see what that would look like. So if the EDA has any feedback or thoughts on that, I'm sure that the commissioners would definitely welcome that input.
I would like to understand better from a builder's perspective what challenges they face or cost-wise when they are looking to develop something in our county, whether it's infrastructure and sewer and water, or what are some of those barriers besides the normal ones we're aware of, which is, you know, building costs and such, but and materials and such. But a lot of times that infrastructure is a huge component that can block, at least from my experience, somebody coming. So I'd like to understand that better.
So
And not just from a raw barriers to, you know, barrier to construction standpoint, but also comparing us to nearby counties. I mean, are there some of those aspects that make it tougher for them in Sherburne versus Wright, for example, or make it easier? I would just like to know how we compare.
So I wonder if it would be worth our time to maybe poll or talk to a few developers to see what their barriers are to developing in Sherburne County, and then also looking at if other counties have any incentives for developing that make it easier to go there than
Or
here.
do they have barriers? Is there something that we're doing better than the others as well that we need to emphasize?
I think one thing we have to start looking at is, a lot of our communities are out of, platted land. And so now they're gonna have to start moving into the raw unplatted proper sites, and they're gonna need these infrastructure improvements, and they are very costly. And we take a quarter of a business and a third of a residential for property taxes. And normally all that falls to a city to do, or a developer in that city.
So yesterday, Government Affairs in St. Cloud had a meeting on housing, and I know Amanda and some others were there, but his name was Nick Erickson, he's the executive director from the Housing Affordability Institute, and he has a whole long presentation. I'm sure he'd be fine with me sharing it with you. He said he'd send it out, I haven't seen it yet, but it was really interesting. And then Central Minnesota Builders Association, I don't know if they have anything to do with Sherburne County, but they had a housing meeting the week before. So I think if you reached out, I could give you Wanda's name too, but I think it was really interesting listening. A lot of them have already done a lot of studies, and they compared us from a state, in a central St. Cloud region, which would, I think, over Sherburne County. So I could give you their contact information and see if they could be helpful, but I know Benton County just did a housing study too, so I don't think we used Maxfield though. I think it was somebody else, so.
I know when I'm,
Because I picked it.
No, what was the amount?
Just from a comparison. Because we did an RFP a few years ago and Maxfield was cheaper.
Was it? Okay. It was maybe comparable, but I know we split it with other people, so I can find out though.
because I know when I'm out and I get approached by a good amount of people, especially when you get to the, I don't wanna say elderly, but more of the 60-ish range that are looking for downsizing opportunities, which would then open up their housing to the market for people coming up, they've got nowhere to go. And they're very frustrated.
They said St. Cloud area, it would take 4 years for us, even with building and even remodeling, current maybe, buildings that are being utilized, but they said it would take 4 years to get caught up to what the inventory and demand is around.
Yeah, our cycle is out of whack.
So, Housing First would be the resource you probably want to tap into as far as costs. They've been, and there again, no going in that it's the Builders Association lobbying group, so that, make sure that you view it through the right lens. And I have to leave, so I'm not gonna go into a long history of how we got there, but they do have a lot of good information, and their focus is on the governmental costs that increase, that create that barrier for housing. So they've been beating the drum on that ever since, I think they remarketed themselves probably in 2010 after the builders got a target on their back at the crash of 2008 that it was a housing crash. And I do give them credit. They said, well, we're not taking that rap again, so they rebranded themselves altogether. But the CMBA is not a member of the Minnesota Builders Association anymore, so they've got good information, but they don't have all the information up in St. Cloud where the Minnesota Builders Association would, and they call themselves Housing First, and I can get you that information. Just a couple of quick comments I have. I'd like to see the word affordable housing omitted. I mean, we're just talking housing, and affordable is a subjective term. Obviously what Laura can afford and what I can afford are two different things. So, we're trying to attract housing, and whatever the market's calling for will dictate where that falls, and we're gonna get a good mix of all kinds of stuff. The connotation with affordable housing is people read it as subsidized housing, and that's not necessarily always a good thing. And it's, the programs that the state and federal have out there are so complicated that you can't even explain it to people anymore, whether it's subsidized housing or not. So if we could just go that we're looking to attract housing, I think we'd be better served. And then also, when you said, for the housing study, I think you said we should add that to our budget. We don't have a budget.
We do have a budget. We have about $40,000 for projects.
Right, but you put that together every year and submit, right?
Right, and we probably would get an initiative foundation grant that would pay half of that, so it'd be about a $19,000 cost for us. If we do the full study again, I think we could just do the refresh, because it's only 3-year-old data, but it was done during COVID, so there might be some changes.
Okay. Well, one suggestion I might have is that somewhere in the strategic plan, I don't wanna get after housing, too much, but we don't talk about putting together a budget in here anywhere in our strategic plan. And I wonder if that shouldn't be a conversation. Many EDAs, most EDAs that I'm aware of, have budgets, to a certain extent that allows them to, when a challenging lot is identified that just can't be developed privately, to be able to go in and use the resources and make it buildable, make it marketable, and get that going. There again, the county has grant resources that a lot of private builders and developers don't have. And there are those properties that come up, and sometimes it's a buy and hold or buy and clean up or whatever, but to be able to turn that property around and get things going. And I think it would also help for the EDA to be able to think bigger on some redevelopment areas that may be coming near to their shelf life, and maybe certain areas could be looked at as far as redevelopment.
Okay, next meeting I'll plan to do a 10-15 minute budget update so you can see where all the dollars are going. And then we can bring that feedback to the county board.
So along with that though, is there, could you also talk to what grants are available?
Sure.
Because obviously I prefer to do grants.
Understood.
Yeah, we all would always want to rely on the grants, but when we can't, sometimes I think we have to be smart and understand these are investments in increasing value, which means increasing tax base.
We're considered an energy transition community, so we are there are funds available for us that a lot of communities don't have.
Yeah, and grants are great. Sometimes the grants come after the project or after the site is identified and things like that. So sometimes they don't move as quick as needed in order to secure property, or maybe as quickly as we want. But agreed, if we can get some of our tax dollars back from the other sources that we pay into, that's great. But I'm of the opinion that we do need seed money here in order, if we're gonna run a proper EDA, I shouldn't say proper, but a more aggressive, EDA, you know, we need to know that we can make those calls and not have to go through the bureaucracy to get back around.
Yep.
I said bureaucracy.
You did, I heard that right out of your mouth. I never thought I'd see the day.
Do we have an inventory of raw land in the county? So, as I look like at Livonia right now, it's pretty well developed.
So you're looking at privately owned land?
Yeah.
We
I
do
mean,
for commercial, we
the-
don't keep track of it for residential, so
But
that's
even,
something.
yeah, the residential property, because I don't see, as developing, you know, I don't see that we can really grow like that much in that area, but like, maybe like up a Big Lake, it looks like, just looking at Beacon, it looks like there's a lot of property up there. So like, when I was looking at it, Big Lake has a lot of businesses, but probably not a lot of people, where Zimmerman has a lot of people, but not a lot of businesses. So it's been kind of
Send them down there to work.
exactly, well, it's, with that presentation that we had up at Sunken Ship, you know, if you get the people, the businesses will come, but that never happened in Zimmerman, so why did that not come? I mean, we have 12,000 people up there and
It's growing very fast. Yeah.
probably what, 400 jobs maybe up there, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Oh,
Then you have to look at the balance too of, how much is the residential paying in taxes versus commercial? And in Big Lake, it's a, last numbers I was aware of was 24% commercial, and the rest is picked up by residential. So you really have, you know, more residential paying for the needs of the city than what commercial industrial does, and you want to get that, you know, balanced up a little better.
Yeah, but like for Zimmerman, there isn't a lot of opportunity to get it balanced anymore. It's too far gone. I mean, the planning wasn't there to make that work.
And County Road 4 is a great road to get into working.
Right.
I gotta leave, Andy, thanks for running the meeting. One final thing, I'll just throw out there, we might wanna consider making this a 5-year plan instead of a 3-year plan, cause Jessica's been so slow getting this done. I only say that cause I'm leaving. Thanks for granting me.
And he's kidding.
PTO, yes, she knows. Have a good day, thank you.
That's good. I do have one other question, if I can just,
Can I respond to your other one?
okay, yep,
Okay, we did sell some county land to Vision, to, not Preferred Power, UMI,
yep,
and Reliant.
Right.
So that was a county plat where we sold the land, and we did develop 3 properties on that land, so I just wanted to point that out a
right,
little
yeah,
bit.
and that's our only development
Yeah.
that we actually have that was county driven, you know?
Yeah.
So, couple other things, like as far as you're touching on that, would we as the county or EDA be interested in, because like the people who are working at the home-based business to get to the next level is a big jump, so would there be, I just thinking maybe is there a partnership maybe like with the township or something like that where the county would come in and we could buy a chunk of property together? Maybe have some smaller lots where they're not the big tip-up panel buildings, just to get them started, to get to that next step of the tip-up panel or the more industrial building.
It's a great idea.
Yeah. And then lastly, with the housing development, because I do some development. And so like when we're talking about the affordable housing and that, and getting the people from either out of that house like you're talking about to get them into something smaller. Mark was up to the township a while back ago and talking about possibly doing like some 1-acre lots, because we could fit enough, there's enough room for a septic, 2 septic locations on there. But maybe if we had like an ordinance of the size of that house that could go onto that 1-acre lot, because then you could start out with a housing or you're either gonna get your starter home or you're gonna get your patio retirement home off of it.
You could look too, there is a development that Big Lake Township did right off of County Road 43, across from the school, and it's an older development, but they did a PUD on, I forget how many acres that area was, but they did a PUD similar to what you're talking about, smaller lot sizes with the well and the septic. And the only problem is that it can be problematic in the future, because if your well and septic fail, you really have to, it's hard to get that strategic space you need.
But with the 1 acre, because when we develop, so they'll go through and look at each lot and make sure that there's, I think it's like 50,000 square feet or 40,000 square feet, so there is an alternate place for a septic on there.
Yeah.
Because if
And
you look
could
like
do
at
that in a PUD style development.
right, but I think he's trying to, I mean, maybe look at that. I mean, I think that's a good option. Like our development that we have out by Orrock, you're not gonna get a starter home out there. They're $125,000 a lot, so they're just, and with the people moving out to try to accommodate that market, that lower, where you could keep it at the 1,500 or whatever the square foot number is, to keep it down to that maybe a $60,000 lot. Sure. But just something to think about.
Did you read that feedback to Mark?
I have talked to him a little bit about it. He was thinking maybe if it was closer to the cities, would be better, but I don't know if that's necessarily would be the best case, because you might be handcuffing the city as far as city sewer and water later on. So maybe if you're just a little bit further out, I guess it'd be, take a lot about, a look at the growth of how the city's gonna build out.
And that would be something that would probably benefit all across the county in township thought.
Right.
And you're right, you have to be really aware of where that city is gonna be going. And maybe the life cycle of what your well and septics will be, because everything is going to grow out eventually, and it might be 50 years, but it'll get there eventually.
Right. And it's only, I mean, we really only have 2 townships where the zoning in the county is gonna work, where it's either Livonia, I think Big Lake is also.
Becker.
Oh, Becker. Does Big Lake Township have their own zoning too or not? Or is it
They have their,
through the county? So I mean, that's like Baldwin, you're not really gonna be able to change anything up there. I mean, they're gonna do whatever they want to.
Good feedback.
I have your notes, so we'll figure out how to.
Okay, that's a lot
Figure
of
out how to
just
like explore that, within.
puking out information.
Another thing, when I was doing research on, options to present to the commissioners for our housing workshop, a housing land trust is coming up quite frequently. And, not to get into the weeds too much on that for the sake of time, but just to throw some numbers at you, there are 7 counties in the last 3 years that have developed housing land trusts in twice as many cities. So it's an interesting option, and if we want to get into a further discussion on exactly what a housing land trust is, we can do presenting on that, but I would like to recommend that that's at least part of our strategic plan to look and see if that's a good option for Sherburne County.
I think we have to be open to looking at everything.
Yeah,
Because we don't know what we don't know.
yeah, okay, so I've added that into the housing piece. And then also, HHS has staff dedicated to housing, and they've got a pretty good finger on where those strong needs are, so I think it would be beneficial to have Lori Irwin from HHS come and do an annual update on everything housing that they're aware of in Sherburne County.
And I was under the impression when we did move into that area, that was what that position was also supposed to do, was to make sure that it wasn't just HHS, it was all of us understanding where our needs were for housing.
So that'll be good then to, okay.
Yeah, I think though, if we're gonna have her present, I think we need to do it with an eye to, I just don't want it to be a presentation. I want some output actions to be associated with it, so it needs to feed in. So the strategic plan obviously drives tactical actions, right? Mm-hmm. So if we're gonna have that presentation, it needs to be aimed toward driving those tactical actions, not just an information presentation.
Yeah, it'd be nice to hear what her recommendations would be to solve the issues that she's seeing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else in housing that we think we're missing in there, or you ready to move on to policy review and updates? Policy review and updates. So like I said before, some of this was taken from the previous strategic plan and pulled forward, and then others was just in conversation that we've had here. Communicate economic development programs, updates, and activities to the Board of Commissioners. The way we do that is prepare and present workshops and memos for the commissioners from the EDA. When that happens, I'd really like that to be information that you as EDA members want to share with the commissioners. And so that would probably be something we'd work on as a group. And then improve communications in regard to permits and zoning as it relates to economic developments and activities in the county. I know we've talked about this before, but really get zoning to EDA to update us on permits and projects in the township areas. And I also, that could be as frequently as you guys would like. It could be semi-annually, it could be annually. And then also to make sure we have a voice in establishing the comprehensive land use plan, which I do feel like we do. Myself and Dan have been at their workshops and provided input on the comprehensive land use plan. And if that's, I know Mark has been here also and presented on that, so if you would like a higher level of involvement with that, you can just let us know.
And I have started meeting with zoning on a weekly basis, so if there's a commercial project, they do bring me in to talk about it, and then I can bring the concerns here as well.
I guess I would like to make sure that we're incorporating the cities as well. It's kind of a big piece of this puzzle also. I know that we do the planning and zoning for a good number of the townships, but yet the cities are a vital factor as well, and I think I want to hear from them also.
And then the last goal in there would be to ensure that the tax abatement financing policy requirements are in alignment with the desired outcomes of that program. And so to review and update the county tax abatement financing policy would be a project this group would undertake. Any other policy review and updates that pertaining to EDA that you think should be looked at?
And I guess when you're talking about the tax abatement process and what I was talking about today, I'd like to see more of that ingrained in it, because we are basically giving them money based on what they're presenting to us as their commitment of what's gonna grow. And I wanna make sure that we keep that line all the way through the end of the abatement.
Put some teeth in it.
Yeah. I want to be able to tell a taxpayer in this county that it's a good investment and we're gonna get what was presented to us in the end.
And we do get, like I said, payroll records the first 2 years, but we haven't been following up on that, so we'll definitely add that.
Okay, broadband. I just threw a goal out there to place Sherburne County in the top 5 for broadband access in the state. I believe we were at 8.
Depends which category we're talking. It's either 8 to 19, depending on what speed they're looking at.
Okay. And that would be explore partnerships as we have, just basically continue doing what we're doing to bring broadband infrastructure here, and also seek out and apply for grants. That was pretty much taken directly from the previous strategic plan. I think what we've been doing has been working. We've seen significant improvement in broadband access the last 5 years even, so 5 and 10.
Top 5 might be a little aggressive, but.
What's that?
Top 5 might be a little aggressive out of 87 counties.
Okay.
I think there are counties in the metro that are quite far ahead of our rural Sherburne, so.
Sure.
I'd like to, not to be the contrarian on this, but I will be. I'd like to, I don't know how to quite phrase this, but I'd like to see a goal around making sure that we're putting broadband in strategically, and that it's making sense where we're putting it in what order we're putting it in. And I do think, and maybe not in Sherburne County, but I do think there are areas where it doesn't make sense to put it. And so I don't want to put fiber down just to put fiber down if there's not a net benefit, because there are alternatives and there continue to be stronger alternatives. So I think I would like to see a goal on this, on making sure that we're putting it, where we're putting fiber down, we're putting it we're putting it in strategically. I'm looking at
Growth corridors, things that could lead to further development. That makes sense.
And when we did that broadband study, how many years ago now?
2015?
Yeah, okay. Is there any way we can bring that up and see, would it give us any guidance as to how we're progressing on what the study showed, and see where those key factors, like to Andrew's point, and also a better understanding of making sure that, in my opinion, fiber is what we need to really shoot for. I know that there's other opportunities that are gap fillers, but I keep hearing no matter what that is, if it's going through the airwaves, there's concern depending on what businesses you have as versus when it's in the ground in a fiber network. So I don't know if that's ever gonna change for what that is the goal. star you wanna hopefully have available. But I'd like to see if where we're making progress on that.
We did do a quick update right before we got the ARPA funds, so we could see where the gaps were. That was part of our ARPA dollars, was that study. We could have that refreshed, because that's been almost 3 years too.
Yep.
And we have made a lot of changes since then.
And it also share with the board, and the new people on the board, what that cost factor was and how we're achieving progress through grants as versus what it would have possibly cost if it would have done it with county dollars.
We can do that.
You know, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to have an update the board on what the current plan is, where the dollars are coming
To
from.
have a what?
An update to the board,
Oh, sure.
you know, on what the current plan is, where the dollars are coming from, you know, because I don't think we've seen, I mean, I've seen a basic version of that on one, we talked about one project. So I don't think it would hurt to give us a refresh and do it as a workshop, so I don't, you know. And then, but I still think, I mean, fiber is the gold standard, but I don't know that it's appropriate for fiber to go to every square inch of the county. Right? So that's what I want to, that's kind of what I want to understand.
Blow the dust off the study and probably get it out for reading material.
I'll send the 21
reading.
study to everybody that's
Okay.
a refresh, and we can see if that's something we want to get updated again for further discussion at this level and at the board level.
Okay. Anything else in broadband? All right, moving into childcare. We have not really done a whole lot in the childcare sector from an EDA perspective. So this is really just a baseline for discussion. I did put in here build relationships with HHS and to learn their work in the childcare sector, because they do have staff over there that are dedicated in childcare as well. So partner with and support them on their initiatives, and then also get regular updates on what they're hearing in there. And then I would also add to this, I think it would be interesting to target in-home childcare providers for BR&E visits and see what,
There's a huge piece of the network there.
yeah,
For what you said?
for BR&E visits, business retention expansion visits, like target that as a market segment and
Yeah.
see, because we're so short on childcare slots and the interest is not there to join because of a variety of reasons, but I'd venture to guess they have some great feedback on what could we do, what could be done to improve that industry and make it more attractive.
They're probably gonna look to government regulations as part of the process. Unfortunately, every time a bad happens, a regulation comes out.
Didn't something change 2 years ago? We made it.
See, and that would be good to,
Yeah, I thought there was some big legislation, I think 2 years ago that affected that industry, but I don't remember for sure.
That's actually Molly's area of expertise. She couldn't make it today, but she's going to give us a presentation on childcare in the area on one of the upcoming meetings.
That's a good idea.
yes,
It's actually just come up twice in my business.
it's a huge factor in businesses. I think Jared can attest to that.
Yeah, we actually have a task force that's just dedicated to that for our plants within Cargill Protein, because it's such a challenge for us right now.
Might be
No.
bringing in an in-house daycare.
That's one of the options that we're definitely looking at. And the other challenge is too, when you look at the hours of operations in industry, it varies by what you're doing, right? A lot of the times it's not your typical 9 to 5s, right? I mean, we have shifts in our plant even that start at 4 a.m. Other shifts that run until 6 a.m., 8 a.m. is finish time as well too. So that's all the things that we're trying to factor into. How do we effectively provide childcare to our stakeholders at an affordable price that makes it, you know, a good plan for them to be able to come into work every single day. So it's one of the biggest problems that we're battling right now.
And the affordability factor is a huge piece of it. When people start to figure out what they're gonna make as versus what they're gonna pay someone to watch their children. If it's even close to a net negative, why are they doing it?
We should look at not just childcare as a whole, but we should also specifically, I think, look at a subset of summer.
Say that again.
Summer, do a subset, look specifically at summer childcare. Because it doesn't solve your problem, you know, third shift, But there is a big issue when school gets out, on how to handle just the summer months.
Yeah, for providers even too, because a lot of their income goes away. Yeah. No, I think it'd be interesting to, like I said, talk to childcare providers, and then as an EDA, figure out what recommendations could we make to the board on how the county could participate in those solutions. Yeah.
Maybe also to the school districts, ISD 728, they have the adventure club, so have early drop off, and then during the summer months, they also take the kids in as well. I think that's pretty affordable too.
And I think most school districts have something like that.
Does Big Lake as well?
Yes, and so does Becker, to my understanding.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, so they're there. But I think it's a good piece to bring in. What can we do to put more kids maybe that way?
Okay. See if we can get through the federal designation of a economic development district here before we have to wrap up. So Benton, Sherburne, Stearns, and Wright counties are the only region in the state that do not have a federal economic development designation. And so because of that, we are unable to, or our applications are far less attractive at the federal level for certain types of grant dollars. And so I would really like to see this happen. It's a huge project to undertake. I know it's been explored before. I have talked to a couple different people at the federal EDA to see what we would need to do. And I think the biggest barriers to make this happen are A, who's gonna pay for it, and the staff time dedicated, and B, there needs to be a separate entity that is dedicated, like a regional economic development agency to administer this. So I did put in here to work towards the creation of an economic development district with all 4 counties. When we did the SEDS plan, that was a regional planning effort. That was something that all 4 counties wanted to keep in there. So there is an interest from all 4 counties to figure out how to work together and actually get this designation. I would propose to develop a regional task force, representatives from all 4 areas, to explore this whole thing and how to get it done. Obviously, communicate with the federal EDA. We would have to explore the creation of a regional economic development agency, or if there are existing economic development agencies within the region that only serve these 4 counties, they could be potential vehicles. I did do some preliminary research. I just pulled up and I have to be a nonprofit agency, so I did pull up all the nonprofit agencies in our area, and there are several that just by their title and business description appear to have participated in economic development activities for this region, and that's it. So possible strategy could be to approach them and see if they're interested in being a vehicle for something like this.
Central Minnesota Jobs and Training, which is what our
They're not
4
involved.
counties, they're not.
No, because
They're
they
not
serve much more than our 4 counties.
So we would have to break out separately with the 4 counties and
Yes.
create and go hook up with some nonprofit that
Correct.
falls under that
There's a
umbrella.
lot of history with this one. This would be a session in itself to go over what this is, what it means, what would be the benefits. So we'll put that on the agenda of a future topic to discuss.
I was gonna suggest that.
You said it costs money, is that just putting like resources toward it, or is there an action?
Every other region has a staff dedicated to just this. And where do you house it? Because if you put it in Sherburne, Stearns is gonna say that's gonna favor Sherburne County. So it's always been kind of a hassle, or not a hassle, a tussle between the 4 counties of who houses it, who pays for it. We're larger, Wright County's larger, do we pay more than Benton County pays? It's a lot of political history to this.
Yeah.
So we should have a session just to discuss what this is and what it means.
And that's the problem, as we continue to grow, we are somewhat outgrowing some of our joint efforts that we've been involved in, our partnerships and stuff, because we are starting to be able to, we should be a standalone at points, or we should just be partnering with possibly Sherburne and Wright.
There's a 20-year history to this that takes far more than 3 minutes to
Obviously, we
describe.
haven't gotten anywhere in 20 years.
Well, and me being the newbie, like I told Dan, I'm like, okay, I'm completely I see past that. I'm like, okay, how can we be the only region in the entire state that can't get this done? Like, I don't buy that. All the people that I know that work here and are part of these organizations, we have enough brains and manpower, woman power, whatever you call it, to get it done. I just feel like that's just, I don't care about the history, as I told him. I'm like, there's plenty of people here to get it done, and I feel like there's no way we can be the only region that can't
And you might
accomplish
look
this.
at it and say,
Yeah.
we do need to reduce it, we do need to not
Yeah.
worry about partnering with Stearns and Benton, we need to start focusing more on what is going to do for us.
Yeah, I mean, there is that too, but I think there's a lot of benefit to the regional partnerships as well. And the designation, Region 7W that's federally designated. Like, they've already said that it's our 4 counties. So I don't know that we're able to say, nope, we're just Sherburne
Change it.
County, Region 7W1. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that we have the ability to say that.
I just know from being
Yeah.
in some of these partnerships that you do hear that when you're in a 4-county partnership, that there's a really large, when you're looking at projects, okay, we didn't get something, it's been 5 years.
Yeah.
And so you gotta be very careful in that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
They will definitely get something.
Yeah. Okay. In addition to the federal designation, which obviously we need to have a little workshop here on that, make an annual adjustments to the Region 7W SEDS alternative. I'd be more than happy, and I know Kathy walked in, but I'd be more than happy, and I've talked to Kathy about this too, but just facilitating a review, either annual review, so when it does come time to re-up our SEDS in 5 years, it's not such a beast. We've had continual feedback throughout the years. And then also create a network of support for Region 7W development efforts, which I feel like we've been working towards, but I would like to see, and this goes down into marketing too, but a regional marketing effort, which I think would be super interesting. We've got like GPS 4593, they market for their region, and they've got some awesome marketing materials. And again, I think if we could put all of us together, we could really market our region well. So, but from there, I think that we need to wrap up for today because I have my other meeting afterwards and I have someone waiting online to present to our group.
So just to wrap up for next meeting, I have budget, we'll go over a presentation, childcare, we'll have Molly talk about that, and then we'll bring in a developer to talk about some of the challenges. Does that sound like a good next meeting?
And then Dan, do you want to give the group an update on what the board just did with the CMRP between Wright County and Sherburne County?
Yeah, health study was approved to start that process to the environmental linkages. It's the first step in any kind of river transportation crossing, so we're moving. Glacier speed, but we're moving.
All right, if that's everything, then motion adjourned.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second,
I'll second.
all in favor?